Welcome to Outside View Scandals, where we explore some of history's wildest and most controversial stories. Today we're diving into the chaotic and tragic story of King Charles VI of France, also known as Charles the Mad. Yes, you heard that right. Charles VI, the King of France, was plagued by bouts of madness that threw his entire kingdom into disarray. Imagine a king who sometimes forgot he was king, thought he was made of glass, and ran through the castle in frenzied fits. Sounds like something straight out of some medieval soap opera, doesn't it? But this was real life for Charles, and it came with very real consequences for France. So let's set the scene. The year's 1380, and Charles VI has just become king at the age of 11. His reign starts with great hope and promise, and he's even nicknamed Charles the Beloved. Unfortunately, that nickname wouldn't last. As Charles grew older, he started exhibiting strange behaviors that would eventually plunge France into political chaos. But let's rewind for a second. Charles was born into the House of Valois, a powerful dynasty, but one with a rather dark history of mental illness. Looking back, it seems that Charles inherited more than just the crown. When he was a teenager, everything seemed to be going well still. He was described as handsome, chivalrous, and even a promising ruler. But by his 20s, cracks started to show, and not just in his composure, in his mind. In 1392, Charles experienced his first major episode. It happened during a campaign against Brittany. One day, seemingly out of nowhere, Charles snapped. He drew his sword and began wildly attacking his own men, yelling that they were trying to betray him. He ended up killing several of his knights in a fit of what we might now call a psychotic break. From then on, these bouts of madness became a regular occurrence. Sometimes Charles would forget who he was, and not in a poetic, existential way. He literally didn't recognize his wife, children, or close advisors. Other times, he believed he was made of glass. Yeah, glass. He reportedly wore padded clothing to protect himself from shattering and would refuse to let people touch him. If you think medieval rulers were eccentric, Charles took things to a whole new level here. His illness didn't just affect him, it threw the entire kingdom into turmoil. Imagine a country where the king is sometimes lucid and capable, but at other times completely unhinged. France became a land of uncertainty, where nobody knew if the king would be in his right mind from one day to the next. And Charles' episodes opened the door for some ambitious nobles to seize power. His uncles, particularly the Dukes of Burgundy and Orléans, began to fill the power vacuum left by Charles's incapacity. Each had their own agenda, and neither was particularly interested in putting the king's welfare first. Instead, they were busy plotting against each other, with France caught in the middle. This power struggle turned into what we now call the Armagnac-Burgundian Civil War. In one corner, we had the Armagnacs, who supported Charles's son, the Dauphin. In the other corner were the Burgundians, led by the Duke of Burgundy, who sought to control the king. And in the background was Charles, sometimes aware of the chaos, other times lost in his own world of madness. The conflict was brutal, bloody, and filled with betrayals, all of it exacerbated by Charles' inability to rule effectively. The court was a mess torn between factions, with each side claiming to act in the king's best interests. It became painfully clear that having a mad king was a problem that went beyond the throne room. Now, Charles's wife, Isabeau of Bavaria, didn't help matters. In fact, she was often accused of having her own agenda. Rumors circulated that she was having affairs and plotting with various nobles. Isabeau's reputation wasn't exactly spotless, to say the least. Many saw her as power-hungry, willing to manipulate her husband's illness to further her own position. It's unclear how much of this was true, but one thing's for sure. Isabeau's actions didn't exactly bring stability to the throne. The scandal surrounding Charles's madness, combined with Isabeau's rumored infidelities, only worsened the kingdom's political instability. And meanwhile, the English saw this chaos as the perfect opportunity. During Charles' reign, the 100 Years' War was still raging on. With France divided and Charles incapacitated, the English seized the moment to invade. In 1415, they scored a major victory at the Battle of Agincourt, decimated the whole French forces there, kinda. And the victory of Agincourt allowed England to push deeper into French territory, and things were looking bleak for France. And just when it seemed it couldn't get worse, Charles made a move that shocked everyone. In 1420, he signed the Treaty of Troyes. Under this treaty, Charles essentially disinherited his own son, the Dauphin, and recognized Henry V of England as his heir. That's right, the King of France handed his crown to the King of England. Why? Well, in this condition, it's hard to say for sure, but many believe that his advisors pressured him into it, using his madness to get what they wanted. The Treaty of Troyes was seen as the ultimate betrayal. The French people were horrified. Charles, the king who once held so much promise, had given away his kingdom. By the time of his death in 1422, France was in complete disarray. He died as Charles the Mad, a tragic figure whose mental illness had led to one of the darkest periods in French history. In the years following his death, France would eventually rally, largely thanks to figures like Joan of Arc, who helped to restore French pride and the crown to Charles's son. But Charles VI's reign remains a cautionary tale, a story of what happens when power meets madness and when personal tragedy spills over into political disaster. So, what can we take away from Charles VI's life? For one, it's a reminder that mental illness, especially in a position of power, can really have far-reaching consequences. Charles was a king, but his madness affected not just him, but an entire nation. It also shows us how political opportunists can exploit situations for their own gain. Charles's uncles, his wife, and various nobles all used his illness as an excuse to further their own ambitions, regardless of the impact on France. So thank you for joining us on Outside View Scandals for this journey into one of history's most tragic tales. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more explorations of history's darkest scandals. And remember, power and madness have always been a dangerous mix. And if you want to see another video, the next one is right here in the end screen.